The philosophy of yoga is timeless and cannot be bound within any sort of timeline. I know that we're putting history and philosophy together, but make no mistake, the philosophy of yoga, the heart and the essence of yoga, is truly boundless and timeless. It is said that the wisdom of Hinduism, essentially, and I need to explain that in just a second, what Hinduism actually is. But it is said that this wisdom has been around for all time because this wisdom, this philosophy, the essence of yoga, it doesn't just belong to yoga. It doesn't just belong to India. It is something that is universal and connected to the cosmos, the divine, God, whatever you want to call it. There's lots of different names for it, okay? What I mean by this is the heart of yoga is something that has always been around for all time. The wisdom, the philosophy of it, the meaning of it has been around for all time. And it said that it was channeled, for lack of a better word, it was understood, it was brought into manifest reality by the yogis or the rishis or the people who were open to, they acted like a portal, I suppose, to receiving the wisdom and wrote them down as the Vedas. So we have this universal knowledge that's everywhere, not bound by like India or humans or anything like that, or it's definitely not a religion or a belief system or anything like that. It's this boundless knowledge and wisdom that was then brought into existence, portaled through these beings, written down as eventually as the Vedas. The Vedas are, and I say eventually meaning that it was most likely transmitted orally for some time before it was actually written down into the Vedas. This is what's called Shruti. This wisdom of Shruti means that which is just like known. It wasn't a story that was made up like what's called Smriti. Smriti, it means that would be like our epics. So like the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, they were more story-like and more like from human versus the Vedas, for example. This wisdom is beyond human. It was just brought into manifest reality via humans and made into yoga and writing and architecture and all that sort of thing by humans. But it's not owned by anyone or any place. It's universal. And this is why we see very similar concepts emerging in different parts of the world. They were just channeled or portaled, or there's humans in different parts of the world that were open to receiving this wisdom that we all have access to. This is why I said in the intro video that a lot of the philosophy you'll feel it because it's a deep knowing. It's not it's something that's already inside of us that we all have access to. Yoga is just the portal for us to actually receive, same like meditation. It's the practice or the path that allows us to receive. So what am I talking about? At the heart of yoga, what yoga is, and okay, hang on, because the word yoga is both the portal, it's the actual practice, it's the action of doing, it is the asana, it is the meditation, it is the svadhyaya, the self-study, it is the reading of the scriptures. It's the act itself and it's the destination. So it's both the journey and the destination is what yoga is. It's not just the final, we're doing yoga when we do our asana. When you come to yoga practice, you're doing yoga, but the purpose of it is to be yoga. So it's both the path and the destination. So the heart of this philosophy, what we're trying to get to, is a remembering that we all have access to, that we essentially are so much more than just what's in this physical reality. It's a remembering that we are connected to all things. This is what's called non-dualism. However, there are yoga schools and philosophies that are dualistic. What do I mean by these words? Because you're going to hear them a lot. Dualism is two. There's a separation. What it's referring to when we look at philosophy is a separation between Purusha and Prakriti. What's that? Purusha is this divine, boundless, infinite light that is in all things. It's in you, it's in me, it's in the plants, it's in animals, it's in the air, it's in this sofa. It is a connection with the divine. You can use the word God if that resonates with you. Cosmos, eternal light, whatever. Purusha. Purusha is that unchanging essence in all things. We're going to be breaking this down a lot, so bear with me, okay? Prakriti translates to nature, meaning it's that which moves or that which changes. So thoughts are Prakriti, emotions are Prakriti. The human body is Prakriti. Steph wall, you, this laptop, everything has both a material, ever-changing aspect to it, as well as an essential nature. So I have an eternal light, an essence that is connected to all things, connected to the divine. And I also have Prakriti. This body will change. It changes every day, and it will be gone one day. I'll die, and all these material things that we have, it's always changing. And yet, within the changing, there's an unchanging. There's lots of different words for this. There's lots of different ways of explaining it. We're going to talk about it in more detail, so hang tight. So dualism means that there is a difference between Purusha and Prakriti. And it also often refers to the individual being and the divine. So in a dualistic way of thinking, or a dualistic school of yoga, like classical yoga, I am separate from God. I am separate from all beings. I am my own uniqueness, and everything else is or are their own unique beings. We are not connected. Now, there might be aspects of ourselves that are connected via Purusha. So even though we're all our own individual uniqueness, people, things, beings, aspects, manifestations, we are all still connected through this divinity that weaves through all of us. But my divinity, my Purusha, is separate from your Purusha. So when we die, we become liberated from this earthly realm, from Prakriti, from the body. But because we have this unchanging light inside of us, we don't ever really die. It's just the Prakriti, it's just the body that dies. The eternal source or essence just becomes enmeshed again with the oneness of the universe. Now, in dualistic schools of thought, that process of liberation was called Kavalia. My little Purusha, when I die, my Purusha, this inner light, which you can't touch it, you can't see it, you can feel it for sure, but it's not like, it's not Prakriti, it's not material, right? It's a light that will go back up to the cosmos, but it will stay isolated. Kavalia actually means isolated. It also means liberation, but don't worry about that. It will be isolated with other Purushas. So it's like we're all up there, but we're all separate. We're all connected to the divine, but we're separate. That's dualism. Non-dualism means that there's no separation between Prakriti and Purusha, God and you, the divine and plants, and your dog, and all of it is expressions of the same thing, which is God. And there's lots of different names for that as well, which we'll talk about. So essentially, there's that eternal, boundless, essential light, the cosmos or God or universe, that is also in all beings. Remember, that's the word Purusha. But it's also expressed as skin, as hair, as plant, as dog, as water, as couch, as all things in existence, according to non-dualism, are expressions of the same thing, of God. So, dualistic thought means two. There's a separation between God, the divine, and beings. Non-dualism says, no. Everything in existence is all an expression of the same thing, which is God. You can see how they're radically different, right? And yet they're both under the same umbrella of yoga. Either way, whether we're talking about dualism or non-dualism, the heart of yoga is to connect with that Purusha, with that eternal, unchanging, essential self that's inside us and all beings. So then yoga gives us all these different paths to get there. And there changes depending on what school of yoga we're talking about. Some schools believe you can't get there, and by that I mean liberated. And once you're liberated, remember there's different definitions for what liberation means, but once you're liberated, you're enmeshed back with one, with source, with God, with universe, with cosmos. And so there's lots of different paths to get there. Some of them, some philosophies, some schools believe you need to die to get liberated. There's different schools such as Tantra, which believes that actually, no, now in the here and now in this lifetime, you can become liberated. And this is where we see things that you've probably heard of, like karma or samsara. So that's the life, death, life, the reincarnation cycle. I'm sure you've heard of reincarnation before, right? You keep getting reincarnated until you've actually been liberated from this existence here on earth. A way that this was described to me that I actually kind of understood is, think of an ocean. The ocean is this like massive, boundless, infinite source of light. Think of that like the cosmos. So in the ocean, all is one, right? All of water is one. It's one source. It's one being. Yet, there's these waves that come up. in the ocean, or that breaks at the shore, right? The little individual waves would be individual beings. There'd be a wave for your dog, a wave for you, a wave for your mom. All these little waves, they're still a part of ocean. They're made of ocean. They exist because of ocean. And yet, each wave is its own unique individual existence, its own individual little being that comes out of the ocean momentarily, and then it goes back into the ocean. And then it comes out of the ocean and it comes back in. But every time it goes out and in, it changes, right? You'd never have the same wave twice in nature, right? You'd have a wave, it goes back into the ocean, it meshes with the ocean again, and then comes back as a completely different wave, right? So that would be like us with our lives. We're enmeshed in the oneness, in the cosmos. We come down to earth to have our experience as Steph Wall with this unique life that I'm meant to have. And this is, as it said, this is God or universe or cosmos experiencing life through Steph Wall as this being named Steph Wall, who's Canadian and gonna move to Scotland, and then she's gonna da-da-da-da-da, all that sort of thing. So it said that God is experiencing life through me, just the same way that God is experiencing life through you and your unique existence. So we're all part of this oneness. We come into existence, and if we do our practices well, we don't have to come back to earth. We just get to stay with oneness. We get to stay with and be a part of divine. We always are, but we don't have to come back to this world, this life of suffering and, all the stuff, being all the stuff that comes with being human. Instead, we just get to stay up there and hang out with, God, essentially. Be a part of God, because we are a part of God, according to non-dualism. So the practice of yoga, the point of yoga is it's a journey. Remember I said it's both the journey and the destination. So it's both the path to liberation and it's liberation itself. So yoga's like, right, okay, let's teach meditation, pranayama, asana, concentration. We've got all the yamas and the niyamas, which is the way that we act in life. We've got all these texts. We've got all of these different sources and resources for how to practice to become enmeshed with one again. Whether that enmeshment happens in our lives or after we die. Depends on the school of thought. And it depends, again, what does liberation actually mean? Does it mean that we go back into the ocean, right? So the ocean analogy is non-dualism. Whereas if we're talking about dualism, you can use that same analogy, but the wave would always be, the analogy wouldn't work. Never mind. Because the wave would always be separate and not a part of the ocean. It would just, there'd be ocean and then there'd be wave, and they'd be two separate things, which doesn't happen in nature. So that doesn't make any sense. So the path, the techniques will vary from school to school. And when I say school to school, I'm not meaning like modern day, like vinyasa versus yin. That's not what I mean. I'm talking tantra versus hatha, or, even we can maybe put we wouldn't put Ashtanga in there because that's too new. So it's just the different philosophical beliefs. There's different paths that we take. Some were not physical at all. Like we didn't really see the physicality start to emerge until about the 1500s when Hatha Yoga comes along, or at least the Hatha Yoga Pradipika comes along, which is the text. Before then, there was still physicality to it for sure. We'll talk about that later. But a lot of it, depending on the stream, but the Brahminical stream would have been very much sit quietly in meditation. And not really do your asanas. And then there's other schools that were very heavily based on the body. They all had different perspectives on what is the body, right? Some, if you're non-dualistic, would be like, oh, the body is an expression of God, so of course we have to take care of the body. But if they're dualistic, they would see this as just like a vehicle. They actually saw it pretty negative, as in like this is like a burden. Actually, we want to be liberated from this whole existence thing and being in this humanness thing. They would want to be separate from that, right? But at the heart of it all, it's all a path of remembering that there's so much more to us than just this skin and bones and our names and our bank accounts and what we do and the things we have. There's so much more to us than that. And these practices bring us to that place of remembering, which is always there. We just fuck it up because we're so preoccupied with the past and the present and our expectations and what do we want and what do we have and what can we achieve, and I don't like this but I do like this, and we get pulled away from presence. But really, when we're present, we're in that oneness. When we are really here, like in our bodies, maybe in a deep meditation or in your yoga asana or playing with your dog, like walking in nature, drawing, when you're just so present, that's where the union of Purusha and Prakriti, that's where the remembering of Purusha lies, is in presence. So all of these Warrior 2, headstand, meditation, Nadi Shodhana, all that is just different tools for like, how do we help these humans be present? Here's 1,000,001 ways to help them be more present. Here's some texts. Here's some acts of service. Here's some breathing techniques. Here's some yoga poses. Here's some mantras. Here's some yantras. Here's some whatever. Like, here are all these different ways to remember that we're so much bigger than what we think. We're so much more than just this container. But a lot of us have forgot that. Most of us have forgot that. So it really is a path of remembering. So, it's interesting to know this because there's a lot of talk around cultural appropriation of yoga and all that sort of thing. But remember, this path and the destination are timeless. And they're everywhere. It's just worded different. Like, it's just worded different in Buddhism or in the Native American traditions, or, it's the same stuff. It's just talking about it a little bit differently. And then, of course, it's been very collapsed and oftentimes corrupted as well. So the essence of it has changed a little bit. But at the heart of yoga, at least, we know it's about remembering and connecting with something so much deeper, which lives in presence. You cannot find this. You cannot remember this by thinking about the future or going into the past. It doesn't live there. It only lives here. It only lives in this moment. And that's why we have all these different practices of yoga to help us get there. And again, we see this in different traditions. In shamanism, it's the drumming, or plant medicine, or in Buddhism, it's all different, but it's all the same. And it cannot be owned by any group. It wasn't just spontaneously thought of by any group of people. It's divine wisdom that was just channeled. It's like art. True art doesn't belong to anyone. The artist just opened up and was able to bring to life something bigger, something that was in unmanifest form into manifest human material form, right? So again, that's dualism and non-dualism. That oneness that's inside of us, is it connected to something bigger? Is it an expression of God, or is it separate? This is where, again, this classical yoga is dualistic, meaning that it's separate, or the Samkhya philosophy, we'll talk about that later. Whereas Tantra is very heavily non-dualism, so they believe everything in life is an expression of God. And, which is that's definitely where I live for sure. But it's hard, right? Because if we're non-dualistic, it means, if we think about the ocean and the waves, it means that, your annoying boss, or when something bad happens, or when awful things happen on earth, that's an expression of the divine as well. And that's, sometimes we don't like that. We like to instead be separate and other, and they're the other, and I'm not that. And it's us versus them. And it's, like we live in a very, very dualistic world in every way, in the way that we speak, in the way that we treat each other, in, the fact that we have borders, and you can live here, but you can't live there. And you can do this, but you can't do this. And you can look like this, but you can't look like that. And you can say this, and it's us versus them, and it's wars, and it's just dualistic, right? We live in a very dualistic society. So for us to approach dualism, we need to really, it could be radical transformation for some, because we've been so enmeshed in, or just ingrained in believing that we are so separate. No one will understand me. No one gets me. Well, actually, yoga is saying that there's actually a part of you that is in all things. So how could you ever not belong? How could you ever not be understood? How could you ever be separate when the essence of you is connected to all things? And, again, it's hard. It's a beautiful concept, but it's one thing to, for something to be a concept, and it's another thing to actually live it. But, I invite you to start. We want to make this embodied, right? So take this theory and bring it into your life. The language that you're using, is it dualistic or is it non-dualistic? The way that you see life, the way that you treat animals and nature, are you treating it like they're expressions of God? Or are you treating it like there's the other, right? So we're going to go into this in much more detail, but there you go. There's the heart of yoga philosophy. And I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you soon.